So I would like to go ahead and welcome Dan. He graciously has done this. I've asked him about 6 times to do this presentation. He obviously has a lot of great experience on helping people with their presentation skills. He has his own company where he does media training and coaching and counsels clients on really mastering this skill. He's trained hundreds of people, CEOs, C-suite executives. As you can see, a list here of fabulous clients. There was many, many more. I just pulled out a select few. He also has some great experience in working in PR, and before that, you may have seen him. He was on television. He was an anchor. He did court reporting. He did producing. So he has quite a varied background, and we are thrilled that he's with us here today and to share some of his thoughts on interviewing. So Dan, welcome. Dan's we're switching the controls here while he gets everything set up.
I am right here. Thank you so much, Heather, and thank you, everybody. I do want to start off by letting you know that during this presentation, I'm going to be playing a few video clips. They're a lot of fun. You'll enjoy them. They make some terrific points. However, WebEx still hasn't mastered the video playing through the software, so what you will hear perfectly, most likely, is the audio. The sync on the audio might be a little off. So the lips might be moving. It might remind you of the old Japanese movies where the lips don't match what the words are saying. Don't worry about that if that happens. Concentrate only on the audio. That is by far the more important part between the audio and the video. But for some of you, it may work beautifully. All right. Well, again, thank you, Heather. Let me launch right into this. And I want you all to focus on the word connect. You'll see here on my title slide, we're going to be talking about persuasive communication, which is the key to interviewing and presenting success. And the way that you're going to do that we all do that, is by connecting to our audiences. So the theme today is going to be how to connect, how to better connect with interviewers, how to better connect with audiences when you deliver presentations, how to better connect with colleagues and with friends and with family. So many of the tools I'm going to go over today with you will help you with those kinds of connections on a daily basis. It is what I call persuasive communication. The tools will help you feel more comfortable and more confident as a communicator. And you might notice that 2 of the words I just used start with the letter C, as do the words confidence, clarity, and control. For me, the 3 C's, the 3 most important C's to help you with the 4th C, connecting. If you think of other words, by the way, that start with C that suggest what you should be as a communicator, throw them my way, type them up. I love to hear suggestions. Typical ones are charisma, conciseness, credibility, compassion, consistency, care. Believe it or not, there are many more. Okay, so how are we going to do this? Well, first we are going to start with a couple of quotes from famous quote master Mark Twain. It usually takes me 3 weeks to prepare a good impromptu speech. One of my favorite quotes, because it speaks to such an important balance that I want all of you to consider when you are preparing for and actually delivering a presentation or conducting an interview. It's the balance between, on the one hand, being prepared. Obviously, you all know preparation is essential, but the right kind of preparation is even more important. And certainly I'm going to teach you what I think is the right kind of preparation. But on the other hand, this quote speaks to the importance of being yourself, of being natural, conversational, so that no one that you're speaking to will ever think this person is robotic. They're speaking from memory. They're reading from prepared notes. You should never read from anything, even in a formal presentation. Do your best to work from notes. Again, the balance is be prepared, but sound impromptu. Sound like these words are coming off the top of your head for the first time, but in fact, you've prepared all of them. The second quote by the same Mr. Twain speaks to a concern that I'm sure many of you have. There are 2 kinds of speakers, those who are nervous and those who are liars. Everybody's nervous. A great quote to think about is, instead of getting rid of the butterflies, get them to fly in formation. Nerves are good. They help you with energy. They help you with passion. So don't be concerned if you walk into that interview room feeling nervous. It's going to help you. Don't be concerned if you get up to that lectern to deliver a presentation and you're feeling nervous. It's going to help you. Having said that, of course, nerves do get in the way. The more you prepare properly, the better. And there are always good exercises like breathing in for 3 seconds, holding that breath for 3 seconds, and then breathing out for 3 seconds. It's a great tool for helping with the nervousness. Okay, so what am I going to be talking about today? 3 primary things. First of all, some overall persuasive communication tips. These tips apply to virtually every kind of communication you can think of, like the ones that I went over before. Second, very specifically, job interview tips. The persuasive communication tips, of course, apply to job interview tips, but these job interview tips are very specific to how to prepare for an interview and how to conduct an interview. And then finally, what I think is the most important is what I call question control. The idea that even when you are the recipient of questions, when you are answering questions, you are still in control of that dialogue. Even when you're getting questions from a large audience, or you're getting the obvious questions from the interviewer, you can still control that conversation. And I'm going to show you how. The idea in general is that every single question that you get is an opportunity to deliver a message that you determined prior to this communication opportunity that you wanted to deliver. Okay? So it's very far from what some of you might be thinking right now. Oh, he's going to teach us to be like a politician who ignores the question and just gets to the message that he or she wants to deliver. Far from it. Your credibility is way, way too important for you to ever do that. But it does suggest that you want to take a question and turn it into something that's much more valuable in the question. The answers are always more important than the question. Okay, it all starts with the right kind of preparation, like I said. And the next slide is going to talk to you what I think is a great way to prepare for both a presentation and an interview. And it can be for preparing, believe it or not, for a voicemail or for an email. It works across the board. This is a message triangle. The idea here is that I'm going to show you the 3 components that fill up this triangle. One triangle equals one message. My suggestion to you is jot down 3 triangles on a piece of paper. You don't have to do it now. I'm saying when you're ready to prepare for whatever's coming up, 3 triangles. In each triangle, you are going to write one of 3 key points. In an interview, this could be your 3 strengths. In a presentation, the 3 main points that you want to get across to the audience. These points are always differentiating. They differentiate you from the competition. They differentiate you from other interviewees, other applicants. So each triangle should have one key point. Together, 3 key points that differentiate you from anyone else that this interviewer is speaking to. Then you're going to start to prove it. First, with facts. Obviously, the specific facts that you're aware of, any facts that prove that you are organizational, that you have great passion for this job. Whatever it is, you're going to come up with specific facts. And then, even more important, examples. That's why it fills up the biggest part of this triangle, because it is that much more important than the other 2 sections. What do I mean by examples? Any of the stories, anecdotes, experiences, analogies. If you ever do a media interview, which I prepare a lot of people for, sound bites are terrific examples, ways to provide a visual to the listener so that they can literally answer the question, can you see what I'm saying? The more that the listener can visualize what you're telling them, the more you connect with them and the more they're going to remember you. So it is so important to come armed with examples, with specific experiences so that you are showing rather than just telling. 2 huge words, I'm sure you've heard them before. Write them up on a big board in front of you. Tell and show, and circle the word show. It's all about providing visuals and proving through those visuals why you stand apart. Okay? So that's the start of it. 3 triangles, 3 messages, chock filled with facts and examples. Now, the one thing that's going to get in the way immediately in any one of these situations is attention span. I'm going to ask you all at this point to type up what you think is the average attention span of an adult in the U.S. Idea being, how long does it take the average listener, and this could include any of you right now, how long does it take until the average person drifts? They have a background conversation. Perhaps they're thinking about the stove that they left on, or the homework they got to get to, or the kids, or the weekend plans, or any of the above. How long does it take for the average person to start drifting? And the answer is, I see 1 hour. Nice. I see wait a minute. 1 hour from Melissa, 45 seconds from Darian. Wow. I would love to talk to both, figure out why it's such a major discrepancy. Well, guess what?
I got a ton coming in, Dan. I got 15 minutes, a minute, 30 seconds, 1 minute, 5 seconds, 15 seconds. What do you think?
Well, so far, the award goes to, she just disappeared from my screen, but whoever said 8 seconds, you're 1 second off. It's 9 seconds. But basically, you're right. It's unbelievably little. The average 8-year-old, by the way, has an 8-second attention span. So we adults, not too far off. What this means is that the average interviewer who is interviewing you, and their job is to listen to you, they're drifting. They're not going to be listening the entire time. When you deliver a presentation in front of 10 people, 50 or 100, those folks out there, they're drifting. You're going to be losing them, and that's normal. And never be distracted by people who are looking at their watch or yawning. That's going to happen with every single presenter, even the greatest. So my methodology is this. What I'm about to give you is what I call communications math. And this math not only helps increase that attention span, but more importantly, it helps the audience remember the most important parts about you and about what you said, because that's what matters in the end. Studies show that right after any presentation or interview, the listener, the interviewer, the audience has already forgotten 50% of what they just heard. Later that evening, 75%. By the end of the week, 90% is gone, which means that we have to focus on the 10% that is remembered. Wow. And the idea, of course, is they've got to remember the right 10%, the stuff that you wanted them to remember, those messages, those 3 triangles. So this is how it works. Here's some media math for you. This equation does not equal 9, nor does this one. And they don't equal each other either. The first equation suggests what I want you to do, and the second is what you should not do. First one, 3 messages times 3 reinforcements, meaning limit what you say, limit the scope of what you say over the course of this interview or presentation, and reinforce those same messages 3 times. Obviously, this is just an example. It's silly math. You can reinforce it twice or 86 times, but the more important number is the first one. Stick to 3. It's a magic number. Sure, if you have 4 or 2, that's fine too, but the idea is limit and reinforce. If you do so, then this equation equals 1 or 2, meaning that 1 or 2 of those strengths that you talked about, 1 or 2 of those messages that you delivered in that presentation will stick in the minds of the audience and will be part of that 10% at the end of the week. The other way is 9 messages once each. It's the kitchen sink approach. You just throw everything at the audience and you hope one of them sticks. Guess how many stick? That's how many. 0. It just doesn't work. When you're scattered, when you have 9 slides in a presentation that have nothing to do with one another, that cover 9 different topics, none of them are going to be remembered. I guarantee you. You can ask the audience, and maybe they'll remember the last one just because it was the last one. It may not be the one you wanted them to remember. And all along, I want you to make sure that you follow the next very difficult rule to follow. This happens too often. During an interview, something comes to mind. Something in the question that the interviewer asks you makes you think, oh, maybe I should tell them this story. Or maybe I should go in this direction. They might be interested in it. No. Look, you're probably going to do it anyway. It's human nature. But do your best not to. Do your best to stick to the messages that you decided in advance you were going to stick to. And again, big difference between memorize and deliver a scripted message versus knowing your messages and delivering them over and over again, but in different ways, using different facts, different examples to reinforce the same messages. Do your best to stick to that. Okay, now, first video comes up. This, for me, it's a 2+ minute interview, so stick with it. It's not an interview, sorry. It's a video of a presentation. And you're going to be surprised at who I've chosen as an example of a superb presenter, specifically because he does the 3x3. It speaks for itself. Watch this. This is Ashton Kutcher, the young actor, doing a presentation at the Teen Choice Awards. Again, if the sync is off, don't worry, just listen to his words.
My name is actually not even Ashton. Ashton is my middle name. My first name's Chris. And it always has been. It got changed when I was like 19 and I became an actor. But there were some really amazing things that I learned when I was Chris. And I wanted to share those things with you guys because I think it's helped me be here today. So it's really three things. The first thing is about opportunity. The second thing is about being sexy. And the third thing is about living life. So first, opportunity. I believe that opportunity looks a lot like hard work. When I was 13, I had my first job with my dad carrying shingles up to the roof. And then I got a job washing dishes at a restaurant. And then I got a job in a grocery store deli. And then I got a job in a factory sweeping Cheerio dust off the ground. And I've never had a job in my life that I was better than. I was always just lucky to have a job. And every job I had was a stepping stone to my next job. And I never quit my job until I had my next job. And so opportunities look a lot like work. Number two, being sexy. The sexiest thing in the entire world is being really smart and being thoughtful and being generous. Everything else is crap, I promise you. It's just crap that people try to sell to you to make you feel like less. So don't buy it. Be smart, be thoughtful, and be generous. The third thing is something that I just relearned when I was making this movie about Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs said, when you grow up, you tend to get told that the world is the way that it is. And that your life is to live your life inside the world and try not to get in too much trouble and maybe get an education and get a job and make some money and have a family. But life can be a lot broader than that when you realize one simple thing. And that is that everything around us that we call life was made up by people that are no smarter than you. And you can build your own thing. You can build your own life that other people can live in. So build a life. Don't live one. Build one. Find your opportunity and always be sexy. I love you guys.
It really surprised me when I first saw this. If you had told me that Ashton Kutcher would be an example of a terrific presenter, I would have been surprised. But it works, and it works for obvious reasons and for the reasons that we just talked about, which is that he had three main messages, and he reinforced them throughout. So I guarantee that if I were to poll all of you right now in person and ask you, all right, how many of those three things do you remember? I guarantee that 90% of you would remember at least one, 50% of you would remember at least two, and then probably close to 25 to 30% would remember all three. And you're probably all saying right now, yeah, I know all three. Opportunities equals work, being smart is sexy, and build a life. And if so, phenomenal, because it works. It works when you decide in advance, as he obviously did, what he wanted to talk about, even though the whole thing was off the cuff, extemporaneous. It was obviously not memorized, but he delivered 3 messages and reinforced them. I just love that. And to go pretty much on the flip side of people here is Winston Churchill, who believes in the power of repetition as well. If you have an important point to make, don't be subtle or clever. Hit the point once, come back and hit it again, and then hit it a 3rd time with a tremendous whack. Okay? No need to be subtle with the delivery of important messages. During that interview, come back and remind the person why you stick out, what 3 things you have that no one else has. Okay. Before we now move on to job interview tips, specific tips, one quick discussion of the power of body language. This is something I work a great deal with my clients when I do training sessions. Most of my training sessions are in person. They're either a half a day or a full day, and they're heavily reliant on practice, on-camera practice. So I capture everybody doing it, whether it's an interview, a media interview, a job interview, a presentation, we play it back. And part of what I'm looking for is their body language, because body language is so important. And I'm sure you all know this, but there was a great study done a while ago that looked at what we call the 3 V's of communication. The visual is your body language, how you dress, how you look, did you comb your hair, is that tie a good-looking tie, the way you stand, the way you sit. Vocal is the sound of your voice, the speed, the intonation, the volume. And then verbal are your messages, those 3 triangles that we already talked about. And this study looked at those 3 to determine which one of them was the most important, which one of them had the most impact, and by how much. And I'm sure most of you are thinking it's visual, and it is. It turns out that 55% of the impact of any communication, any presentation is due to body language and to what the audience can see. 38% to the voice, and a whopping 7% to what you say. This thing has to be taken with a grain of salt, a large one. Even the researcher who did this said, look, content is still king. But the idea is that without the other 93%, the nonverbal, the content goes nowhere. So it's much easier to teach this to you in person because each one of you will benefit greatly from getting specific advice on your body language and on your voice, but keep in mind how important it is. And so that some of you may come away from job interviews saying, I don't know why I didn't do well. I delivered everything I wanted to say. I said everything that I should have. I gave every example. And in the end, it may have been just because you were slouching, or you didn't look confident, or you didn't look the person in the eye, or you didn't use their name. So I will go over all of that. Okay, now, moving on. Let's go over some specific job interview tips. First, I'll discuss what you can do before, and then what you can do after or during, and then after. Doing your homework involves the following. Naturally, you've got to research the place that you are interviewing. Too often, when you've got many interviews, you focus on yourself. You focus on your strengths. You focus on your messages, but you don't focus on who you are speaking to. Of course, you have to, and this includes researching the person, the specific person or people who will be interviewing you. In today's days of social media, of LinkedIn, virtually everybody out there has some kind of presence, usually LinkedIn. It's guaranteed that if you do a quick search of the person who's interviewing you, you're going to find something about this person, something that maybe other people did not find out, something that's going to help you bond with this person. I'll get back to that in a second. Of course, the dress code, you got to know generally the dress code of the firm that you're speaking to, because you do not want to show up in a tie with suit and tie when it's a young firm with a very casual dress attire. They're all in jeans and T-shirts. It naturally separates you. We're talking about connection here and doing everything you can to connect. And the moment you walk into the room and you're dressed entirely different from the person who's interviewing you, that connection is severed, or it's hard to gain that connection back. Same on the flip side, of course, don't underdress. That's very clear. Preparing questions, of course, but more important than just thinking of the questions that are going to be asked is not only thinking of answers, but looking at your messages and asking yourself, if they ask this question, which of my 3 messages could I get to? And you're going to be able to do this better in about 10 minutes when I go over bridging. The greatest question control technique that you'll ever have. It's a way to take a question you don't know the answer to, a question you don't want to answer, you shouldn't answer, you can't answer, or a question that simply is not related to what you wanted to talk about, and still be able to get to one of your 3 messages, all right? And then something that just amazes me because it's not thought of enough. Why are you a good fit for this place? It's not what are your 3 strengths and why are you so terrific and why is your background so excellent and your education. That's all fine. Everyone that this firm interviews has a great background. But why are you specifically a good fit for this company? I want you to write down 3 questions right now. And they are the following. So what? Who cares? And then the 5 letters, W-I-I, F as in Frank, M, which stands for what's in it for me. Or as a client of mine once said, what if I fail miserably? No, it's not the second one. What's in it for me? So what? Who cares? Meaning that everything you say in an interview or in a presentation has to benefit the listener. There's got to be some kind of a takeaway, a benefit, a way to make this person feel you're going to enrich our place. You're going to enrich me. So important to make that connection. Okay. During the thing, while you're speaking to this interviewer, while you're doing a presentation, how can you connect better? A number of ways. First of all, common bonds that you can get from that LinkedIn search, but also during the interview, figure out a way that you can connect with this person. Maybe you have something in common. Maybe there's a picture in the room of the person sailing and you have some kind of affinity for sailing. If there's a way for you to create a bond, which then makes this person remember you, that's enormous. Because in the end, again, it doesn't matter so much what your messages are, but it's the way you connect those messages to this person and how memorable you are. They interview 20 people in a day. They want to remember you through common bonds. They will use their name. Another one of these, obviously, you got to use their name. Do you know how often that is not done? Or the opposite, it's done too much. Beginning of every one of your answers is, well, Dan, and Dan, I think I'm terrific for this because that's nauseating. You got to use the name sparingly, but use it. It's also a great way to diffuse the tension of a difficult question. Just drop their name in there. It's a fantastic connecting tool. One of my favorites is this. It's essential to be honest. So if you don't know something, say you don't know. It's okay. It actually makes you much more real. But be careful. Don't be overly honest, all right? Don't talk about the other interviews that you're doing. Don't talk about what mistakes you may have just made. Don't apologize for anything. I'll always remember that I was being interviewed by a client, someone I wanted, or a prospective client, someone that I was hoping would hire me. And I knew that they were interested in 2 things. One was media training, which is what I do, preparing people for media interviews. And the other was media pitching, helping place people in media interviews. That's not something I do. I knew that he was interested in that only because of what he said in emails prior. In the middle of the interview, he hasn't asked a thing about this. I just volunteered. By the way, Ralph, you should know that even though I know that media pitching is something you're looking for, that's not something I do. I knew at that second that I had lost the job, of course. Never go somewhere that's unnecessary. Had he asked, do you do media pitching? I would have said, no, I don't. But I'll tell you what I do. Oh, I just said do, sorry. Don't be overly honest, okay? But do be honest. Speaking of lack of honesty, fake it till you make it. Meaning your confidence is so important. It's so important to come across as comfortable and confident that even if you're not feeling it, fake that confidence. That's what we'll get through. And then making an impression. All right? Again, the way to have this person remember you, have this audience remember you. I'm not talking about doing impressions. Leave that to Dana Carvey and Frank Caliendo. Make an impression. And then perhaps the most important thing, you got to be yourself. You have to be natural and relaxed and tell a good story about yourself. A wonderful way to connect. All right, quickly on following up Yes, you're going to follow up with thank yous, of course. I like this very old-fashioned tip, which is for the top choice to send them a handwritten note. Once again, it's a way to connect, and it's a way for you to be memorable, okay? Never stop staying in touch. Even if they said they're not interested, follow up once a month. Let them know you're still around. Let them know you still are interested. Send them a note. Send them something that you read online that you think they'd be interested in. It's a wonderful way to keep in the minds of firms that may initially not be interested in you, but very well could be later. A lot of us get very upset. We didn't get the job. Forget it. We're throwing that name in the trash. Don't do that. Stay in touch. All right, now. My favorite thing to teach, question control. Once again, this is the concept of being in control of this dialogue even when you are not the one asking the questions. It will almost feel like you are. The best way to put it is the way that Henry Kissinger put it. Many years ago, when he was Secretary of State in the 70s, he was known for starting press conferences in the White House by asking this question. This is a communication coach's dream quote because it gets perfectly to the heart of question control. He knew the answers going into any press conference. It probably was 3 messages that he thought of. And he was telling himself that no matter what question he got, he would get to one of those 3 messages. Hopefully he did it in the credible way that I'm about to teach you. But regardless of that, what he was hoping for is that the subsequent questions would be based on the information he just gave. That is control, where you answer a question and then you get to something else and you tell them something of such interest and importance and it's so fascinating because it's a great story, and then the person says, oh, really? No, I didn't know about that. Tell me some more about that. So the more that they follow you, it'll feel like you're the one asking the questions and you will be in control. Now, how do you do that? I know it can sound tricky. You're going to do it by taking a bridge. I am New York City centric. It's where I was born. I live nearby, and this is one of the bridges in New York City. It's the Queensboro Bridge. Why is it the Queensboro Bridge? Why does this matter? Well, it connects the 2 boroughs of Queens and Manhattan. So write down on a piece of paper Q for Queens, M for Manhattan on separate sides of the paper. And then also write that Q equals question and M equals message. The idea is that when the questioner begins in Queens with a question that you don't know the answer to, or you can't answer or shouldn't answer, or is just completely off topic, you want to end up in Manhattan. You want to end up on message. So how do you get there? How do you get there without frustrating the heck out of the listener, without doing what politicians often do, which is to say something like, well, that's a great question, Dan, but what I want to talk about is this. Well, you haven't answered the question. You haven't even addressed it. You just characterized it. Careful with that phrase, that's a great question. It's one of my least favorites. It's a pet peeve of mine. Don't say that's an interesting point. It most likely isn't. Don't say I'm glad you asked that, because 99% of the time you're not glad. And when you say that's a great question, you're probably thinking, I have no idea how to answer this question. You're buying time. It's understandable. You need a little time to think about it. Don't buy time with phrases that are disingenuous and that are pure filler. They're going to know it. So what do you do? How do you address a question that you can't answer, you don't know the answer to, and still get to a message? All right, the next few letters I want you to write down are ATM. Go to the ATM, meaning A, put it right next to that Q. A is addressing or acknowledging the question. It is, to extend the metaphor of the bridge, it's paying the toll. Now notice I didn't say answer. Answer suggests a long-winded, long-formatted question that you probably will deliver when you don't know the answer and you're trying to make stuff up and you're doing your best. You get yourself into a lot of trouble. Don't answer, don't over-answer, don't be overly honest. Address or acknowledge, meaning you can say yes or no, or you can say, I don't know, or you can say, I'm not sure, or that's not my area of expertise, or that's not information that I'm privy to, or if you're doing a presentation, that's not something that our company is allowed to talk about. It's a legal matter. There's always a reason that you can't answer a question if you can't. you got to give it. You can't just say no comment, and you can't skip it. Now, once you've done that, you are now going to transition over to Manhattan, over to your message, with a phrase like, what's especially important is. What I want you to think about is this. On the other hand, let me put this in perspective for you. Did you also know that? And then the key one is what I do know. So they ask you a question, you don't know the answer. You know what, Dan, I don't know the answer to that question. I'll be happy to look into it and get back to you, but I'll tell you what I do know. And as soon as you do that, they're already starting to forget that you don't know the answer to their initial question, because you're now going over to Manhattan and delivering a super message that they didn't realize they'd be interested in, but they now are, because it is interesting, and you prepared it in advance. You can do this with any question. Instead of going on more, let me give you a couple examples now. Here are the next two videos, the only other two videos. The first one is cringeworthy. It is very difficult to watch because it shows a CEO who struggles. I am not sure why. I'm guessing that he was way overly focused on his messages and didn't consider how to connect questions to messages. Take a listen.
Meantime, the gum wars are erupting on Wall Street, also in the candy aisle. Brad Irwin is the North American president of Cadbury. He's the candy man, and he's here to talk to us about what are some of the forces facing this industry right now. Brad, it's great to see you.
Nice to see you. Thank you.
All right. We've been talking about cocoa prices, for one, how that's a market where you've seen some huge price increases. We've been wondering how that's been affecting you, cocoa prices, but also other commodities. What's that mean for Cadbury's bottom line?
Well, we're full steam ahead on our business right now, and things are going quite well. So we're optimistic about the future.
But what about commodity prices? They are increasing. How do you deal with some of those higher prices?
Well, we, as you say, one of the things we do is we innovate our products to improve them and offer better value. And one of the products we have now is Trident Extra Care.
Like what things? If cocoa prices increase, let's say, by 75% over the course of the year, how do you improve your margins when you're dealing with those costs?
Well, I can't speculate on what cocoa prices may or may not do in the future.
That's what they have done over the last year.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So how do you deal with that?
Well, what we try to do is to innovate our products, offer new products with better value.
You just offer great products.
To grow our business.
Just offer great products at reasonable prices that taste really good, Brad. Don't have any comments on anything happening in the industry. Can we ask you about competitors? Is that a fair question, or we won't get an answer there either?
And it just gets worse. Is that cringeworthy or what? What I find fascinating is that if you were to watch it again, the second anchor had the little lav mic, the little lapel mic in his hand instead of on his lapel or on his tie, which means that he was not supposed to be part of this interview. And he heard it, and he couldn't help himself. He just jumped onto the set, grabbed the mic, and chimed in the way he did. And some of you might be thinking that was overly harsh, but you know what? It isn't. You can't be the CEO of Cadbury. I think he's the head of U.S. Cadbury. You can't be someone like that and go on CNBC and answer questions the way he just did. Again, who knows what happened? He wanted to talk about innovation. He wanted to talk about new products. He obviously desperately wanted to talk about Trident Extra Care, so much so that he completely blanked when being asked relatively easy questions. And when you're the head of a chocolate company, you should be able to answer, what are you doing in these times when cocoa prices are so high? So what he should have done is ATM, okay? The question was in Queens. He got to get to Manhattan. If he wants to talk about innovation and new products, he simply says, you're right. This is a challenging time. Cocoa prices are high. What we're doing right now to combat that is we are looking in other areas. We're looking to candy specifically and to gum. In fact, where the margins are much, much better. In fact, we have this new gum. It's called Trident Extra Care, blah, blah, blah. There he has credibility. There he was still able to get in an innovation and gum message even when the question was about chocolate. And his credibility is intact. The rest of this interview would have gone in a completely different direction if he had simply paid the toll just by addressing the question first. All right, now, let's go to the flip side.
I hope you have a good example.
We have a wonderful example now. About 2 years ago, was it 2 year and a half? I don't know. Any of you Oscar Academy Award nuts out there will know this. Anne Hathaway, when she won the Oscar for Les Miserables, I think that was a year ago, maybe 2. Anyway, about a week before the movie premiered, she was at some event. She got out of a limousine. She wasn't wearing underwear for some reason, and the paparazzi got some shots. It was called a wardrobe malfunction. All right. She goes on the Today Show right after that happens, and of course she had already been scheduled to do that interview weeks in advance, and it was supposed to be about the movie. Well, the first question wasn't about the movie. Watch what Anne Hathaway does here.
Anne Hathaway, good morning. Nice to see you.
Good morning, Matt.
Seen a lot of you lately.
Sorry about that.
You were.
I'd be happy to stay home, but the film.
Let's just get it out of the way. You had a little wardrobe malfunction the other night. What's the lesson learned from something like that, other than that you keep smiling, which you always do?
Well, it was obviously an unfortunate incident.
Yeah.
I think it kind of made me sad on 2 accounts. One was that I was very sad that we live in an age when someone takes a picture of another person in a vulnerable moment, and rather than delete it and do the decent thing, sells it. And I'm sorry that we live in a culture that commodifies sexuality of unwilling participants, which brings us back to Les Mis, because that's what my character is. She is someone who is forced to sell sex to benefit her child because she has nothing, and there's no social safety net. And so let's get back to Les Mis.
One of the most creative turns of a question I have ever heard, and I'm going to take it at that.
That is the essence of question control. That's mastery. It is so lovely to be able to see someone so gracefully take a difficult question, not ignore it, but use it as an opportunity to get to what she wanted to talk about. All right, that's it for now, folks. As a reminder, my 3 most important things is 3 times 3. Number 1, come up with 3 messages, reinforce them, stick to message. Number 2, connect. Find as many ways to connect with the person or people you're speaking to. And 3rd, control this dialogue. Use bridging, use the ATM method to get back to your messages as often as possible, as often as comfortable during this communication. All right, Heather, I'm done. I'll questions now.
That's great. I love that Anne Hathaway interview. I was thrilled that you wanted to include that one. And as you were talking, one of the things that I was thinking of, and a couple of questions that were coming in, were, how you relate what you want your message to be. How do you know what that should be based on the company? Do you have any tips for people about knowing more how to figure out what their message is?
You mean in terms of researching the company, knowing more about them, and how to make your messages apply to them?
Right.
Yeah, it's just about it's research. Find out as much as you can about the firm. Naturally, you're going to go to their website. You should read press about this firm. It shouldn't just be information that the firm puts out itself, but information that others have put out about the firm. So when you Google, make sure you hit the news link at the top of Google so that you're reading news about the firm. Get to know the partners, the people who run the company, and get to know also in their own website, get to know their values. There's always a page that talks about the company's values, what they respect, what keeps them going, what their philosophy is. And when you read that, I can guarantee every one of you out there that you'll be able to find a value that they have that you also value. Don't fake this. Don't make this up. And so that during the interview, you can say, in my preparation for today, I noticed that you value X, Y, or Z. That's always been very important to me as well. In fact, and then that's where you have to prove it. Prove it with an example. Prove it with something, a personal experience. And right there, you're telling them, look, I did my homework. I know what's important to you. I've got that, and that's why we're a good match. So that's the idea, is to know the firm much more than just what they do, more about what they care about, what is important to them, what their culture is, what their employees are like. So when you get those questions, by the way, in an interview, when they say, what do you want to know about us? Don't ever say nothing. Never, never. You've got to use that opportunity. In fact, try to get those answered early on if you can. You can even control at the beginning and say, before we get into this, I was hoping you could answer a few questions about your firm. That's genius, because then they're going to start telling you, yeah, this is important to us and this is our culture. And then if you're swift enough, you can then take that information and apply your messages to it.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. One of the things that occurred to me when you were talking too is that, you talk about, fake it till you make it, but it's the honesty. It's to be yourself. And I think for some people that gets a little tricky, but the answer is know yourself. Know what's valued about you and your strengths and your values, and know what it is that you shine in. And so that's the other part of the homework. Too. It's the company and yourself, and then you can find the good overlap. We have a couple of tools online that help people with that. If you are struggling, go to our website. There we have some coaching referrals. Also, one of the things Dan talked about was practicing your interviews. We have if you don't have the ability to get somebody else to videotape you, there is an online tool we have called Interview Stream under the job hunting tools on our website, which is down here, that can help you with that.
And I'll add to that, I have
I'm
sorry to interrupt, but I'll add to that these days every single device that we have has video recording capabilities, and for $7 on Amazon you can get an iPhone tripod adapter, which lets you put an iPhone on a tripod. If you don't have a tripod, buy one for $20, and you have a perfect setup to record yourself or have a friend or a colleague ask you some questions. It is way, way, way too important to actually flex the vocal muscles and practice your responses. Practice delivering your messages, because if you just do it in your head, it won't come out right in reality.
Really good point. And we do an alumni spotlight where a lot of people we've interviewed, and they've just given some great answers. So you can have some good examples on our site as well. Questions coming in about that for you, Dan, are so a couple of people are saying, oh, Anne Hathaway had it easier than the Cadbury CEO. Can you talk a little bit more about her answer and why that was a good answer, and more examples of transitioning and why she was so good at transitioning?
Sure. It was somewhat of a softball question. I think partly because of the way that Lauer teed it up. You could tell that he was somewhat uncomfortable asking it, and he should be. It's ridiculous that he had to ask it. He had to. I'm sure his producer said, you can't let Anne Hathaway go without asking about this. It's what our viewers want. But it's not so much about the question. I actually think the Cadbury question was super easy, too. There was nothing difficult about that question. It's about cocoa prices. He's the CEO of a chocolate company. It's more about the transition. It's more about the comfort and being able to take any question, whether easy or hard, and using it as an opportunity and finding a way to get a message. So, okay, the question might have been easy. What did you learn from that? Fine, not so tough. But her way of finding a lovely, credible, elegant way to get in the movie, that's where the genius is, because she didn't do that on the fly. You know that she practiced that in advance. Sure, she's an actress. She can do a little bit better than most of us, but with a little practice, we can all do the same. We think about, if I ask this question, let's see, which of my messages could I get to? Oh, it's that one. Here's a good way to transition it. So I actually like a tool that I call an issues grid or a tough question grid. Simply draw 4 columns on a piece of paper, 4 columns. At the top of the left one, write the letter Q. Then the next one is A, the next one is T, and the next one is M. 4 columns for Q, A, T, M. In the Q boxes, write down every issue that you think might come up, every kind of question, not the full question, not the and then and, just one word that represents the question. Then look at your 3 triangles, your 3 messages, and say, if I'm asked about that, which one of my 3 could I get to? If the Cadbury guy had written down cocoa prices on the left, he could have written down new products on the right. And then you fill in the A and the T. How would I address that question? Would I say, I don't know, or I'll look into it, or I'm not familiar with that? Or would I say, yes, absolutely, I agree? And then how would you transition over your message? It's a nice blueprint that works especially well over the phone, by the way. If you're doing any kind of important interviewing over the phone, you have your messages on the one hand, and you've got your issues grid on the other. So again, it's less about the question and more about how you can transition and how you can successfully get a message in, even when the question has nothing to do with it.
Great. That was really another great tool that you're sharing with us. Another quick question that came in was, when you're using the interviewer's name, should you use first name, last name, Mr., Mrs.? What's your recommendation with that? I find that trickier today than I ever did before.
It's very, very tricky. It's in many ways a cultural question. It so depends on culture. If you're in Germany, if you use a first name, you'll lose the job immediately. Here, it's much more acceptable. But the simplest way to figure that out is at the beginning. When you meet the person, you go in and they say to you, hi, and if they say John, you got it. If they say I'm Mr. Johnson, you got it. And if they say John Johnson or Sam Johnson, you say, great to meet you. Would you prefer Sam or Mr. Johnson? Put it in their lap. Let them tell you, and they will most likely say very comfortably, I prefer Mr. Johnson or I prefer Sam. If you don't know and you have to default, then go for the more formal and let them at that point say, don't call me that. That's my father's name. Call me this. So I do a little homework beforehand.
Well, and also what you're saying is that, again, it's about communicating. It's just putting it out there, asking the question, not making assumptions or being nervous, or it's just, what's the polite thing to do?
Such an important point, Heather. It's so much of this is about common sense and about being relaxed, even if you don't feel it, and asking the questions that you really want to ask and need to ask and not be afraid to do so. People love that. Whatever it takes to create better bonds and to create better connections with these people, if it means asking some questions up front, do it. They'll respect you for it, and you'll connect better.
Absolutely. So here's an interesting question. If the interviewer's body language indicates that they're not interested in one of your messages, do you recommend cutting it short or sticking with it? So with shoes on the other foot, interpreting other people's body language.
That's a wonderful question. I don't want you to over-interpret negative body language because you could be wrong. You really could be wrong. Someone could be looking at their watch and they're thinking, oh, man, I hope this lasts a lot longer than it's supposed to because it's so fabulous. No, but seriously, you could be wrong. If it's obvious and they're giving you straight signals that what you're giving them is not answering the so what, who cares and what's in it for me, and they just don't care, then yes, cut it short. And then you can attempt to bridge to another message or at least just cut it short. Usually what I find is that attention span lags and body language turns negative when you're in the top of the triangle, when you're just telling and not showing, when you're just making exclamations about yourself or giving lots of facts. As soon as you turn to an example, a personal experience, that's when attention span or the body language changes. And now here's a great little phrase to think about. Write this one down as well. Jolt so they don't bolt.
I like that one.
All right, jolt so they don't bolt. Bolt, again, it could literally mean that they want to run out of the room, or it could mean that they are their attention span is flagging during the discussion, during the interview, during the presentation. So jolt them. How do you jolt? There's about 25 ways to jolt. You could change your energy. You could pause. Didn't have a chance to talk about one of the greatest communication tools that we have available to us, pure silence. One of the most powerful. It allows you to think about what you want to say next. It allows you to think about how you want to format your answer. It allows the interviewer to think about what you've just said. And it gets rid of those darn verbal crutches like and and like and all those other non-words. We use those because we're usually speaking too quickly and our brain can't come up with the right word yet. So for fear that silence is going to suggest that we don't know what we're talking about, we don't pause and we just fill. That's a great jolt. Using their name is a great jolt. Asking them a question is a great jolt. It's about this connection, about it, reminding them that you're aware that this other person's in the room and you're making connections with them. Those are other great ways to deal with negative body language and a clear indication that the person is just not interested or not listening to you.
Well, as you can see, I've started the poll because I can see we're getting close to the end, but there was a few more questions, so I thought I would turn on the poll and ask if you could just start with that while we're finishing up here. So another good question, and again, Dan, thank you. That was a really good, some good ideas and tips. And it did occur to me how hard it is when you were talking about it. It's when you're turned down. Turned down from an interview, the hardest thing is reinitiating that conversation. Do you have any more tips about that?
Yes, and I kind of mentioned it before. You don't want to be someone who, first of all, you don't want to disappear, and you don't want to be a nagger. You don't want to just call or email saying, do you have any positions available now, or are you interviewing again, or would you reconsider? That never works. you've got to provide something. You've got to be a giver. There's a great book out there called The Giver. There's a few of them, but this specific one speaks to the importance of providing value to people. And in this setting, it means, as I mentioned before, you came across a great article that you think this person might be interested in. Maybe during your interview, you were talking about a baseball game, and you didn't get the job, but you made that bond, and then you read something about a game. Send them that article. Send them some information that you just came upon. Send them some tips that you came across. It's always a way. It's a nice excuse to say, hey, I'm still here. I'm thinking about you. I'm not here to say, give me a job. I'm here to say, remember me? I'm the one who spoke to you about this. Well, here's something of value for you. Just nice ways to remind without being too pushy.
Mm-hmm. Great. The last one, or there may be more that have come in, but I can't see them yet because of the poll. But I got a question about, what about those marathon days of interviewing? You're 3 or 4, maybe 6 hours in their office, meeting with a couple of people. It's sort of hard to stay on your game through the whole day. Any tips on keeping your stamina, on maintaining your great communication skills?
Well, coffee always helps. Taking a walk in between interviews, if you have the time, just to refresh yourself. If you can get outside, it works beautifully. But really, it all comes down to telling yourself that even though the interviewers might be aware you've interviewed, that you have interviewed with other people as well, each interview has to come across as if it's the only one that you're doing. And so using some of the tips that I went over, including using their name, makes them feel like you are connecting with them in a way that others don't. Even if it's your 17th interview, you're still going out of your way to make those bonds, those common bonds, making those connections. Unfortunately, when you're on your 15th interview and you're exhausted, there's not much you can do about the exhaustion, but you got to up your game in terms of the connections that you're making, the bonds that you're creating, and the connections that you're making through name use and other tips.
Well, and if you've put yourself in that situation, hopefully you have done your homework so that you're prepared for the day. I think it's a more strenuous day if, one, the company really isn't a good fit for you, so you do feel like you're faking it through the day. And that's where, we do, so many people, interview because the interview comes along and maybe on paper they're a good fit, but you have to make sure that feels like a fit for you, or it is going to feel like work being there all day. And
Absolutely.
I would say that's good information. If you're feeling dragged down after being in a firm for an hour, maybe that's not the right place for you.
The super point, even if your body is tired, your mind should be excited if you love this place. And if you've done your homework and you've researched each of the people that are interviewing you, if you're provided with that information, and you should ask for it, tell me who the 7 people are I'm going to be interviewing with. You know that you can almost always get that. And you've done your homework and you've got something on each person. When you get to that 7th interview, you're like, oh, this is the guy that does this, and he's a big fishing fanatic, and so am I. So, these are ways to get yourself excited. But I think Heather's point is the best. If you love the place, if you know it's a good connection for you, if it's a right fit, your mind should be as sharp as it was at the beginning of the day.
I am noticing that our time is up, but I want to say, Dan, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you, participants. You were wonderful. You asked lots of great questions. You had some good comments. We will have one more webinar this year, and that will be with Francesca Romano. She works with Collective Eye, and she is a human resources person, and Collective Eye is I was trying to get to the slide. Sorry, the poll wouldn't let me. She is their human resources person, although she's had a great varied experience. But Collective Eye is a startup. It's the second startup from Heidi Master-Martin, and on big data, and she's going to talk a lot about sort of navigating the career field of working at startups in the world of innovation and high tech. So I hope you can join us there. Dan, any parting words?
Practice, practice, practice. I know it's not fun, but man, does it pay off. Just flex those vocal muscles. Get to know yourself. That's a great piece of information that Heather said. And use some of these tools. You're going to find that some of them are so helpful. I have clients that I worked with 15 years ago who come to me and say that 3x3 thing, I still use it. I go into every meeting with 3 messages and I keep reinforcing them, and it's amazing. 3 times 3.
That's awesome. All right, everyone, have a great Friday. Have a great weekend. Thanks, Dan. Goodbye.
Thanks, Heather. Bye, everybody.